So with the rule of rotations, because we have 3 different types of rotations, we're of course going to have 3 different types of rules, or 3 different rules to choose from. Here's the first rule. Okay, number 1 is for a 90-degree clockwise rotation. We can kind of think of this as like our default rotation. 90-degree clockwise rotation. So when we have a 90-degree clockwise rotation, if we start with the point x comma y, it's going to turn into y comma negative x. There's our rule for a 90-degree clockwise rotation. We flip the spots of our x and our y coordinates, and then we flip the sign of our original x coordinate. This can get a little bit confusing, all right, as we'll see. Because if you switch the x and the y first, but then you make the y negative, then it makes everything kind of backwards. So we'll take a look at some examples. Don't worry too much right now. But here's our first rule. I'm going to put it in this little dotted box right there. There's rule number 1. For example, if we have point A at 3 comma 5, sorry, I'll keep it up here. If we have point A at 3 comma 5, and we're doing a 90-degree clockwise rotation, we're going to use the rule y comma negative x, and we're going to set it up just like we did with the rule of reflections. We're going to have our pre-image point on the left, a nice long arrow with our rule atop that arrow, and our prime point A prime on the right. Anyone want to take a guess at what our prime coordinates here are going to look like? Jordan, go for it, Jordan.
3 comma negative 5.
Good, 3 comma negative 5. That's halfway there. That's a good start. What are we going to do after we turn the 5 negative? We got to flip the order, right? So 3 is going to become negative because 3 is our x. And then we're going to bring it over into the second position, negative 3. Y does not change signs at all, but it does change positions up to the front. So that's where 5 is going to go. So Jordan, you said it would be negative 3 comma 5. You were absolutely right, except we got to flip the order around. And that's the biggest thing that might confuse you guys, is remembering to flip them around. But once you graph it, you'll see whether it looks like a good rotation or not based on the coordinates that you get. That's rule number 1 right there. Okay, y comma negative x. So with our rule of reflections, we flipped the sign of one of our coordinates, but we didn't change the order of those coordinates, right? We kept the numbers the same right where they're supposed to be, but we flipped one of their signs depending on the axis. With rotations, because we're turning our shape and we're changing that orientation of our shape, we're also kind of flip-flopping where our x coordinates and y coordinates are. It's kind of hard to visualize. I'll try and get like some kind of video pulled up while you guys are working, just so we can see a more visual approach to this, but hopefully this is starting to make a little bit of sense. Let's go to rule number 2. Rule number 2. Rule number 2 is, of course, going to be a 90-degree counterclockwise rotation. Degree counterclockwise rotation. And with this rule, we're again going to start with the pair x comma y for our pre-image. We'll move it up just a little bit. There we go. And we're going to do something very similar, but just a little bit different. We're still going to flip the places of our x and y. But now instead of flipping the sign of our x, we're going to flip the sign of our y. So the rule here would be negative y, comma, x. I'll box it up so we know that right there is the rule that we apply whenever we rotate a triangle or a point even 90 degrees to the left, counterclockwise. For example, if we have point B at the coordinates 7, 2, and we apply the rule negative y, x, we get the image coordinates for B prime. Anyone want to take a guess at where these image coordinates might be at? I'll give you guys a minute to think, but if you want to take a guess, let me know. Yeah, Wamiko. Exactly. Negative 2, 7. Negative 2, 7. So what I would recommend you do is first flip the sign, right? We're flipping the sign of our y coordinate. So 2 needs to become negative. And then we flip the order, bringing negative 2 out in front. If you flip the order first, you might accidentally change the sign of the wrong coordinate because it'll be in the opposite position of where it originally was. So in rule number 1 and rule number 2, both times we changed the order of our numbers. But when we went clockwise, we changed the sign of our x value, our original x value, our new y value technically. And with a counterclockwise rotation, we changed the sign of our original y value, now our x value. That's why it can be confusing, because everything gets flipped around. There's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is a lot simpler than the previous 2, luckily for us. Because rule number 3 is for a 180 degree rotation. For a 180 degree rotation, does it matter if we go left or right? No, it definitely does not. 2 turns to the left and 2 turns to the right end you up in the exact same spot. So with a 180 degree rotation, we start with x, y. Now this time, because we're doing 2 turns, we don't need to flip the order of our x and y. That only happens when we do 1 turn. But since this is a 2 turn, x and y are going to stay in the same places, but we're going to flip the signs of both coordinates. This one is much, much simpler. You don't have to worry about changing the order and then potentially messing up what signs are getting flipped. So, last little piece of information here. For example, if we have point C at the coordinates of 1, 4, and we rotate point C 180 degrees, who's got those coordinates for me? Noah, go for it.
Negative 1,
-1, -4. That's exactly right. -1, -4. Yes, Victor.
For number 1, how'd you get +5, -3 if it's supposed to be negative?
Good. So, yeah, that's a great question. So maybe I'm taking this a little too fast. Let me break this down a little bit because there's kind of two steps here, right? Step one, if we start with 3 comma 5, right? You could write this off to the side or not. It's up to you, right? X is our, or 3 is our X, 5 is our Y. Okay, that's how we start. Then what we want to do is we want to change the sign of our X coordinate. See how X is negative here? So our X coordinate 3 needs to turn negative. Negative 3 comma 5. Make X negative. Then what we need to do is flip the order of those two numbers so that we end up with 5 comma negative 3. Then flip the order. So yes, we made the second number in our prime point negative, even though our X is supposed to be negative, but 3 was originally our X coordinate. You see what I mean there? Perfect. Great question. And that kind of explains exactly what I meant by some of this is really confusing. So hopefully that makes a little sense. But again, once we get the practice going, you'll start to see the pattern. Also, let me take a look back at yesterday's notes. Because let's verify that this rule actually worked yesterday when we were doing what we were doing. On note sheet number 5, we had a 90-degree clockwise rotation here at the very top of note sheet 5. We started out at 2 comma 3, and we ended at 3 comma negative 2. So in the same way, with example 1 here, we made our X value negative, we made 2 negative, and then we brought that negative 2 to the back and switched it with 3. With the counterclockwise rotation, we started with 2 comma 3. We still flipped the order of those numbers, but now our original Y coordinate became negative. So negative Y comma X. Yeah, Victor.
So for when it's counterclockwise to 3, you just make it negative, then flip it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, when it's counterclockwise, you make the Y sign negative, and then you flip the order. With a clockwise rotation, you make the X sign negative and flip the order. So it's another very a confusingly similar rule across the board here, which is a theme in transformations if you haven't noticed. Okay. Let's see. Do I want to do an example? What kind of work did? Let's. I want you guys to try one on your own before we get to the work here. Let's do example A, and we'll say we want to rotate point D. This pen is dead. Let's say we want to rotate point D, which is at, thank you, negative 2 comma 4. And we want to rotate it. Let's do 90 degrees counterclockwise. I'm going to set this up just like we did before. D is negative 2, 4. We're going to use some rule to get some coordinates of D prime. So take a second. Find the rule that you need to use. Try and apply that rule on your own, and we'll see how well we do. Take 60 seconds, and then we'll talk about it. All right, anyone want to help me out? First, what's the rule that you guys chose to use here? Could someone help me out with what our rule here is going to be? Yeah, Azalea, go for it.
Negative y, comma, x.
Negative y, comma, x. Perfect. How'd you get that, Azalea?
I looked because our rule number 2 is 90 degree counterclockwise rotation, and the rule is negative y, comma, x.
Perfect. Thank you. That's exactly right. We see that we're going 90 degrees counterclockwise. We look back at our notes. Oh, here's 90 degrees counterclockwise. There's my rule. That's just going to get written directly above that arrow, just so we remember while we're using the rule exactly what rule we need to use. Okay? I forgot to box up the third rule, but there it is. So if we're going to do negative y, comma x, which of these numbers are we going to flip the sign of? Are we going to flip the negative 2 to a positive? Or are we going to flip the positive 4 to a negative, Noah?
Positive 4 to a negative.
We're going to flip a positive 4 to a negative. Because again, negative 2 is our original x. Positive 4 is our original y. We're going to flip the sign of our original y term. I'm going to write that in. Flip the sign of your original y coordinate. So we should have negative 2 comma negative 4 now. And what do we have to do before we write our points or our coordinates out? If we flip 4 into a negative 4, now we just have to change the order. So negative 4 will come first. Negative 2 remains unchanged off on the end, just like that. D prime would be at negative 4 comma negative 2. Look at that. We didn't have to use our slide. We didn't have to use a ruler. We didn't have to use a graph or anything like that. And we were able to get the image point from our pre-image coordinates. Not too bad, right? Hopefully. We'll find out.